They had the Epstein files locked away for years. There was no uprising, no revolution, nothing that should have forced their hand. So I keep asking myself the same question. Why release them now and why like this? Child trafficking, ritualistic abuse, murder, the alleged consumption of children, Project COVID, hijacking of Bitcoin. The list of what's wrapped up in the Epstein story is almost too much to hold in your head at once. And yet, after all of it, only one person has faced any kind of meaningful legal consequence. One. I want to get into why I think that is. But before I do, it's worth remembering something. The theory that you could orchestrate the biggest wealth transfer in modern history and that ordinary people would never really grasp what has been done to them. That theory was circulating years before COVID even arrived, and they proved it. What followed was the largest, most brazen transfer of wealth from the many to the few that the world has ever seen. And most people still can't fully articulate what really happened. They just feel it in their heating bills, their grocery runs, their inability to buy a house. Which brings me back to Epstein. They had no reason to release anything. The suppression was working. There was no meaningful public resistance. So the release, whenever it happens and however it's parceled out, is a choice, a deliberate one. And I don't think the goal is transparency. I think the goal is desensitization. Here's how I see it unfolding. There was a promise. Trump was going to release everything.
Some major breaking news as we come on the air tonight because President Trump has now signed the Epstein files bill into law. The final step to force the Justice Department to turn over everything it has on Epstein within the next 30 days.
Then the moment came and it didn't happen.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
And the response from the public? Essentially nothing. Some noise online and then it faded. So why the ongoing drip? Well, I think that COVID actually holds the key to understanding this. What they did between 2020 and 2022 was a masterclass engaging compliance. Stand up, masks on. Sit down, masks off. 3 people at a gathering, but not 4. Gyms closed, but off licenses stayed open. Regulations that made no logical sense, changing week by week, and the public not only went along with it, they turned on anybody who didn't. People were thrown out of supermarkets.
To this now, a man and his children were escorted out of a Turlock Walmart store by police.
Turned away from restaurants, kicked off airplanes.
You're watching a cell phone video that shows the tension aboard a Newark-bound flight as every single passenger is forced off, all because one of them wasn't wearing a mask, specifically a 2-year-old girl.
Screamed at in the street, friends cutting off friends, a kind of social enforcement that nobody asked for and nobody seemed to question. That was the experiment. And it worked beyond what I imagine even they expected. So when I look at what's happening with Epstein, the slow, managed release of documented horror, I think I'm watching the same experiment run again on something far darker.
Well, we definitely received substantial evidence that he was involved in trafficking young women and children to the Virgin Islands.
Show the public an island where children were allegedly abused by some of the most powerful people on earth. Watch the response. Show the flight logs. Politicians, entertainers, the financiers, intelligence figures. Watch again. Drip out allegations of ritual abuse, harvesting of the most vulnerable, of networks embedded in the very structures that are meant to protect us, and keep watching. Because if, after all that, people are still continuing to pay their taxes, still deferring to the same institutions, still treating the ballot box as if it carries any real weight, then something has been confirmed. Something that is, I'd argue, more valuable to those in power than any secret they've ever kept. Push insanity during COVID. Watch. Push more. Watch. Same structure, different subject matter. The question they're answering is not, will people revolt? They already know the answer to that. The question is, how much can we show them in plain sight and still have them comply? This is about 2 things running in parallel. Normalizing the intolerable and demonstrating to themselves and to us that exposure no longer carries any consequences. You are being asked to hold in your mind that the people governing you may be protecting networks that abuse children and then go to work on Monday like it's nothing. File your taxes in April. Wave your flag on national holidays. That is not incidental. That's the point. Cognitive dissonance as a permanent managed condition. A population that knows and has decided, consciously or not, to live with it. Once that threshold is crossed, mass surveillance, open authoritarianism, the erosion of every remaining liberty, none of it lands as a shock. It feels like the next logical step in a world where evil is visible and untouchable. Orwell imagined a boot on your neck in a dark room. What they've actually built is softer than that. Talk shows and outrage cycles. You're not broken into submission. You drift into it, gradually, comfortably. The end result is the same. One thing that didn't go unnoticed, it's not just what was in the release, it was what was very deliberately left out. Anything touching the period around September 2001, complete blackout. Who did you say it was? Those Ruskies again. Oh, okay. Oh, that was yesterday. Today it's Ghana. There's an academic, Professor Yang Sequin, I'm sure I didn't do his name any justice there, who has written something I think is worth taking seriously. He's drawing on Hannah Arendt, and his argument goes roughly like this. Every political structure is shaped by a three-way competition for dominance. Those with armies, those with numbers, and those with authority, the elites, whose influence rests on the public's belief that they are legitimate. When that elite becomes too visibly corrupt, too obviously self-serving, history tends to produce a response. One figure breaks from the group, champions the people, becomes the king, a strongman, a savior. When that figure eventually becomes a problem, the remaining elite allies with the people to dethrone the monarchy, and you get democracy, which corrodes over time back into oligarchy, and the wheel turns again. Young's readings of the Epstein drip is that it may not be an accident or a miscalculation. It may be a managed dismantling of the elite authority, engineered to produce exactly the conditions in which the population asks for a monarch, begs for one. What does a society do when it becomes convinced, right or not, that its leaders are not just corrupt but genuinely predatory? That the people making laws are the same people that are buying tickets to an island where children disappear? It turns to whoever promises to burn it all down. I'm not saying he's right, but it's the most coherent framework I've found for why any of this will be released in the way that it is. None of this is easy to sit with. I'm not going to pretend that it is. But here's where I end up. The experiment, whether it's COVID compliance or Epstein desensitization, is always testing the same thing. Whether you will absorb the information, carry it quietly, and keep functioning inside a system that depends on your participation. The refusal to do that, not rage, not conspiracy rabbit holes, but a clear-eyed refusal to normalize what's not normal, that's not a small thing. That's precisely what the whole exercise is designed to prevent. They're not afraid of your anger. Anger passes. What they can't account for is a person who sees it clearly, stays grounded, and starts building something that doesn't depend on their approval.